My talk today is about the biggest fraud in the history of mankind. It is about the hijacking of the global monetary system of gold standard. It is about controlling the global economy and as such controlling the world through the assumed power of paper money, the fiat money. It is about riba and paper money. Money in Islam is known to be gold and silver. Let us look at what is riba and money as understood in the Islamic conception. The Quran condemned and prohibited riba in one of the most terrifying threats from God to the violators. The Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, explained in few sayings the concept of riba. One saying stands out more than others to define most of the scope and kinds and the essence of riba. It says, exchange gold for gold, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, dates for dates, and salt for salt. Similar to similar, hand to hand. He who gives or takes more incurs riba. The giver and the taker are equal. Should the kinds of the commodities differ, then exchange as you wish, provided that the exchange is hand to hand. It seems that the hadith has defined the following items. Defined 6 kinds of commodities that were essential and commonly used and utilized in their lives. The 6 ribawi commodities. Number 2, any increase of one side over the other because of difference in the quality would be riba. And this is called riba al-fadl, or usury of excess. The Prophet emphasized this concept when a companion brought to him an excellent kind of dates from Khaybar, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, asked, are all the dates of Khaybar of this kind? The man said, no, but we barter 1 sa', 1 volume of this date for 2 volumes of ours. The Prophet said, do not do that, but sell your dates for money and buy these good dates with the money. Narrated by Bukhari. In another similar hadith, the Prophet said, this kind of bartering is riba. Any increase, number 3, any increase of one side over the other because of delay in the time of payment or exchange of the commodities would be riba, and this is called riba al-nasi'a, the deferred usury. The Prophet, peace be upon him, emphasized this concept when he said, indeed the riba is in al-nasi'a, in the deference of payment. That's to say, because the increase is for the delay of payment. It appears that the Prophet, peace be upon him, defined these 6 essential commodities to be reference lines, each on its own, that's to say 6 yardsticks. Each one may be used to price other commodities except its own. In other words, we cannot price gold by gold or wheat by wheat, even if the exchanged qualities are different. It is obvious from the sayings of the Prophet and the rulings of jurists from different schools of thoughts that money in Islam is from gold or silver. Number 2, money is the measure, the yardstick that prices other commodities. Also, other essential commodities human staples such as wheat, barley, are measures and yardsticks. All measures must not be tampered with like a standard measure. Number 3, these measures and yardsticks keep their intrinsic value over the years. 1 ton of wheat keeps and maintains its intrinsic value as a human staple 100 years ago as it is now. As long as Muslims were using the gold dinar and silver dirham as their money, they continued to avoid riba in their dealings and trades. They prospered, and their economies and their golden dinar were a source of stability for centuries. David Friedman, professor in the law school and economics department at Santa Clara University, in his paper, Gold, Paper, or Is There a Better Money? He said about money made of gold, I quote, "Such international monies have sometimes maintained their weight and fineness for several centuries. Examples would be the Byzantine numisma and the Arabic dinar during the Middle Ages." End quote. Having said that very briefly about the concept of riba and money in Islam, let us have a look upon the big game of paper money. When paper money was introduced into the world of economy to replace gold and silver money, the Muslim jurists were faced with a new problem that caused a considerable amount of debate and led to different opinions. The jurist Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman al-Bassam said in his book تيسير العلام في شرح عمدة الأحكام, I quote, he said, "Recently, banknotes were introduced into the market to be as money instead of gold and silver coins. They made for each coin a corresponding piece of paper that carries its name and value. The different opinions of jurists may be summarized as follows. Some jurists said it is absolutely unlawful to deal with paper money because it resembles the selling of debts or receipts of debts on the issuing bank. Some other jurists said we should deal with it as we deal in trade commodities, and therefore there is no riba in dealing in them, with increase either hand-to-hand or increase for the deferred payment. Number 3, some other jurists said we should deal with it as we deal in gold and silver because the paper money is exchangeable with gold and silver on demand from the issuing bank. All these rulings were based on the premise that the paper money would be backed and covered by gold and silver and would be exchangeable with gold or silver on demand for the amount prescribed on them. Facing the realities of that time, and because of the weak situation of the Muslims in the face of other world powers, Muslims had no choice but to accept the change to the new monetary system, and as long as paper money was backed and covered with an amount of gold equivalent to the amount prescribed on them, the system continued to work fairly well. That was the start of the big game. But paper money gave the different governments all over the world the freedom to spend more than they take in. This power was exploited and still by many governments, especially in times of war or over expenditure or corruption, by printing more money and flooding the markets with it. The purchasing power of money goes down, and the governments have to reduce the percentage of gold covering to the paper money. This happened in many countries, including the United States. Congressman Dr. Ron Paul of Texas said in his book, Gold, Peace, and Prosperity, The Birth of a New Currency, I quote, "To finance our Revolutionary War, the Continental Congress issued paper money in great quantities. Over a period of about 4.5 years, the Continental currency fell from a value of $1 paper dollar per $1 gold dollar to about 1,000 to 1. The phrase, not worth a Continental, records the fate of this paper money. In 1913, the gold cover for Federal Reserve notes was set by the 1913 law to be 40%. In 1945, the gold reserves against Federal Reserve notes was reduced 25%. Dr. Ron Paul continued to say, to continue the inflation fraud, this figure, the 25%, had to be reduced to zero. In 1965, gold reserve system requirements for Federal Reserve deposit liabilities were removed, and on August 15, 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window and refused to redeem overseas dollars for gold. The road to rampant inflation was opened to the delight of bureaucrats, politicians, international bankers, multinational corporations, and some labor leaders. The age of the managed fiat money currency was born. The British Empire was even ahead of the United States in that respect. Britain abandoned the gold standard in 1931, 40 years before the United States. Paper money gave the opportunity to stronger industrial countries to buy their raw materials from weaker developing countries with paper money that may be devalued at any time at the will of the stronger country, which would cause the weaker ones to lose the value of their wealth. The same was played within each country, where the rich get richer by keeping their wealth in real estate and investments that can benefit from the inflation, and the poor get poorer by losing the purchasing power of their wages and salaries that never catch up with inflation. With this game, the paper money, Muslims got out of the track with the Islamic monetary system as set by the Prophet, peace be upon him. The world powers changed the track and the direction of the Muslims while they were asleep. Muslims at large, including their jurists, still debate the minute details of riba, interest, and what is halal and what is haram, while their whole Islamic system and track direction was diverted and hijacked from them. By this game of fiat paper money, the tremendous power of money was shifted from the hands of the whole world to the hands of few countries, multinational banks and corporations, which controlled the global economy. The need for military occupation of others became obsolete and was replaced by the economical occupation and control. My conclusion is, no matter what is done nowadays with good intentions of some people to abide with the Islamic monetary system and to avoid riba, Muslims are not escaping the fact that they are not in the driver's seat, but they are riders on a train that is taking them away from the pure Islamic system into an area that is polluted with riba, its dust and vapor. As the Prophet said in one of his hadiths, the time certainly will come over people when none will remain who will not devour riba. If not devour it, its vapor will overtake him Another narrated its dust will overtake him. This has been reported by Ahmad, Abu Dawood, and Ibn Majah. The only remedy is by going back to the Islamic monetary system of gold and silver standard, or by analogy, using other tangible commodities such as wheat, oil, corn, or other essential commodities to cover the value of paper money and give it a stable intrinsic value. Many politicians and economists, as Dr. Ron Paul, are calling for the return to the gold standard. Of course, there is a lot of opposition from governments, bankers, and multinational corporations, etc., to such a change that will deprive them from the powers they enjoy now. Muslims everywhere should support the movement of going back to the gold standard or equivalent substitute commodity. Thomas Mulligan, Times staff writer in New York, wrote an article in Los Angeles Times on September 22, 1996, titled Gold Bugs. And he introduced it by the following statement. Like a genie in a bottle, the idea waits restlessly for a change to be summoned back to life. Now, a small but ardent band of believers thinks the opportunity may finally be at hand for a return to the gold standard. It is the only shot we have had since 1980, says economic consultant Jude Wanniski, an advisor to the Republican vice presidential candidate Jack Kemp, who is one of the gold standard's strongest advocates. Wanniski and fellow gold bugs say restoring the link abolished 25 years ago between the dollar and the gold as is a tonic for all our ills in economy and social life. It will banish inflation, cut mortgage rates in half, slash the federal deficit, and spur such a surge in investment and productivity that the American family once again will be able to live on a single income. Thank you very much. May God bless you and keep you in his tender care. Salam alaikum.